Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. The Democratic Party meltdown over Cornel West continues. And now we have John Fetterman not so enthused about West's run, and other unnamed sources apparently lobbying Cornel West to drop out. A lot to get to. This, not surprisingly, from Politico. Biden world moves to stave off Cornel West and the no labels threat. Inside the party, there is bubbling concern of a repeat from what happened 7 years ago when Green Party candidate Jill Stein drew more votes in 3 critical battleground states than the amount by which Donald Trump beat Hillary in those places. Operatives are determined to not let it happen again. Of course, I have thoroughly debunked this over several videos. Jill Stein did not cost Hillary Clinton the election. In fact, as Vox and others have reported, even if Jill Stein didn't run, Hillary would have lost to Trump. But I digress. This is Politico, and that is the narrative they and the rest of the media want to push. This Politico piece actually has quite a few interesting tidbits here. Let me get to the important parts here. Quote, the third parties can take away enough votes to make Donald Trump win, said Celinda Lake, a pollster for Biden in 2020. Not only do you have no labels, but you have Cornel West, which I think is very formidable also in the Black community and among young people. They are right. Cornel West would be formidable among young people and Black voters. And I think that there was a lot of people, young people, disaffected people who were willing to vote against Trump, anybody but Trump, to beat Trump. But that argument has worn a little thin with some of those disaffected voters in 2024. Wow. A Democratic Party consultant who actually gets it. Must be too good to be true. And as I've shown over the most recent days, the numbers show that young people right now are critical in terms of the Biden Democratic Party freakout. This from the New York Times recent poll. Look at that. If the election were held today, of 18 to 29-year-olds, 9% right now say they will not vote. Less than 1% said they would vote for another candidate. So kind of pops the bubble on the whole Cornel West freakout. Right now, the biggest threat doesn't seem to be Cornel West, among young people at least. Those polls said, 9% of them said, no, we just wouldn't vote if the choice you're giving us is geriatric 1 versus geriatric 2. So what's really interesting about this Politico piece is it names some folks that are not so enthused with Cornel West, and then it alludes to some others who might be pushing him to drop out. Let's take a look here. Quote, I fundamentally believe that you don't mess around with the kinds of high stakes we're dealing with, said John Fetterman in an interview when asked about West. Can you just imagine what a second term of Trump would be? It's all going to be about revenge. Fetterman, toeing the line. We don't want to mess around with these stakes. Can you imagine what a second term of Trump would be? Listen, there's some things I like about Fetterman. Other things, he's didn't run on Medicare for all. I think he's progressive only loosely. But I'm not surprised he's kind of pushing the fear-mongering, because Pennsylvania, where he represents, could be one of the deciding states for Biden. And it went for Trump in 2016. Biden only won Pennsylvania by 80,000 votes in 2020. But can you imagine what a second Trump term would be, Fetterman asks? Listen, I don't want another Trump term. I don't know many of my viewers that do. But is there going to be a massive difference between Biden and Trump? Well, economically, we haven't seen a massive difference between Biden and Trump. Sure, on the margins, Biden is better if you factor in, the incremental crumbs, Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure deal, the COVID relief package, but haven't raised the minimum wage, no public option. He's actually backdoor continuing Trump's horrible Medicare policies that are quasi-privatizing Medicare. So Fetterman, with the whole, can you imagine a second Trump term? It would be awful. But the problem is people don't have to imagine a Biden term. They're living it now, and they're not getting the relief that was promised. And Fetterman knows that. But beyond Fetterman, very interesting, another person who was quoted in this piece, quote, this election could be a game of inches, so I have to believe the president's people are not taking anything for granted, said Jeff Weaver, Sanders' 2016 campaign manager. And for those who know Bernie and Bernie World, Weaver is Bernie's closest political confidant other than his wife, and has been working with Bernie on and off since the 1980s. Weaver continues, quote, "They know every vote has to be earned every time, but there's a lot of concerning data out there, and they will need a full court press by people with demonstrated success messaging those parts of Biden's electoral coalition who have expressed a real lack of enthusiasm." Kind of a vague comment, I would say, by Jeff Weaver. Not exactly telling Cornel West to drop out, not exactly expressing concern about Cornel West, but clearly saying there's a lot of concerning data out there. Biden's team's going to need a full court press to get the message out, i.e. the problem is messaging. No, the problem is he hasn't delivered. He has not delivered. He hasn't even fought to deliver on the core promises like minimum wage, public option, other things, and has abandoned many of those core promises, including ending drilling on public lands. He's expanded it. Hold that thought on Jeff Weaver, though. Here's where it gets really interesting in this Politico piece. Biden's advisors believe that West could eventually abandon his quixotic mission, though lobbying efforts by some of those closest to the academic to get him to quit the race have so far proven ineffective, according to two people granted anonymity because they were not authorized to speak about the private conversations. Let me repeat that. Though lobbying efforts by some of those closest to the academic to get him to quit the race have so far proven ineffective, according to two people that Politico is granting anonymity. So, to be clear, I don't know who the two people are. However, we can take some educated guesses here. Those closest to West would be from Bernie World. Remember, West campaigned for Bernie in 2016, campaigned for Bernie in 2020, still calls Bernie his brother, who he's got some healthy disagreements with. Obviously, Chris Hedges is a good friend of Cornel West, but is publicly very enthusiastic in supporting his campaign. He's not lobbying him to drop out. Nina Turner has publicly said good things about West's run. I don't think it's her that's lobbying Cornel West to drop out. I don't think it's Bernie. I don't really think he would directly be lobbying Cornel West to drop out. It doesn't seem to be his style. However, it could be people that worked for Bernie, could be people that worked atop Bernie's campaign. This is from a separate article from CNN about a week or so ago. This is an article titled "Democratic Worries Bubble Up Over Cornel West's Green Party Run as Biden Campaign Takes a Hands-Off Approach." Well, if you look at this article from CNN, Bernie's former campaign manager, Faiz Shakir, is quoted. Let me give you that quote. Faiz Shakir, Sanders' campaign manager in 2020, who said news of West's campaign announcement, quote, "hit me completely out of the blue," voiced a concern that is shared by many leaders on the left. Quote, "I just hope and pray that he's not being taken advantage of and not being exploited by others for ulterior motives." West bristled at such suggestions. Quote, "When people say, well, the Green Party's using West, I mean, I don't look at it that way. I think that we're all in this movement together. We're trying to do the best that we can to bring some kind of light on the suffering and to bring some kind of vision and organization to try to minimize the suffering." So that's Faiz Shakir, Bernie's former campaign manager, quoted in another CNN piece, in a separate piece from CNN. And here is Jeff Weaver, Bernie's 2016 campaign manager and one of his closest political advisors and a friend of Bernie Sanders. He's quoted in the Politico piece. Again, can't say for fact that Weaver or Shakir are the ones who have lobbied West to drop out, but they are both quoted. Faiz Shakir quoted as having some concerns about West supposedly being used by the Green Party, and Weaver, as you heard, quoted in this Politico piece. I reached out to Jeff Weaver and Faiz Shakir, just asking directly, have you been lobbying Cornel West to drop out of the race. Jeff Weaver did get back, denying so. He said, and I quote, "I have never spoken to Dr. West about his campaign, have not heard back yet from Faiz Shakir. So if I do, I'll update." I also reached out to Cornel West, and he said, "I don't know, my brother." Clearly, he knows who's lobbying him to drop out, but I don't think he wants to spill that tea. So, oh well. But listen, I should probably start saving all these articles. This is about the 7th or 8th article of the same basic theme. Dem Party freaking out, Dem Party meltdown over Cornel West running, just with a slightly tweaked headline and basically similar quotes from different people. If the Democratic Party spent this much time and focus worrying about which policies they could try to enact now to convince voters that are on the fence about Biden, to convince Democratic voters that are considering a third party, to convince non-voters to come out and vote for them, if they spent this much time actually trying to persuade, they might beat Trump very comfortably. But they're spending all of this time hand-wringing and fear-mongering about Cornel West. They're having John Fetterman leave quotes to Politico. Other Democratic Party stalwarts leaving quotes to Politico, CNN, the New York Times, going on cable news to fearmonger. At the end of the day, I don't want another Trump presidency, but we can't continue to have more of the same. That's why, particularly among young voters, people are checking out. If the election were held today, it seems to me the problem for the Biden campaign and Democratic Party would not so much be Cornel West being a spoiler, but significant portions of people, black voters, younger voters, just not voting. I mean, this is from Reuters, specifically on black voters. Self-identified black Americans make up 14.2% of the U.S. population, or 42.7 million people, a 30% jump from 2000, Pew Research shows. These Americans are 5 years younger than the population as a whole, with an average age of 33. And Democrats earning their loyalty is crucial to the party to keep winning in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Georgia, and to recapture districts in the South in the future. But instead, the opposite is happening. Black voter turnout dropped by nearly 10 percentage points, from 51.7% in the 2018 midterm elections to 42% in 2022, according to a Washington Post analysis of the U.S. Census Bureau's survey released earlier this year. While voter turnout slipped by only 1.5 points to 53.4% among white voter turnout. That is a significant drop among black voters. Quote, black voter turnout was down across the country in 2022. We saw it in the polls, the surveys, the exit polls, and every way you could measure it, said Michael McDonald, a politics professor at University of Florida. This is an interesting number from the New York Times Siena poll. This is from Roy Texera, Substack. The latest New York Times Siena poll has made an impact and underscored the Democrats' vulnerability on many fronts. The poll found Trump and Biden tied in a 2024 trial heat 43-43, with 16% saying they are undecided, would vote for another candidate or not vote at all. There are many striking demographic patterns in this result, but one of the most striking has been little talked about: Biden's weakness among non-white, working class, non-college voters. Biden leads Trump by a mere 16 points among this demographic. This compared to his lead over Trump of 48 points in 2020. That's a 32-point drop among non-white, working class. So black, brown, indigenous, they're the working class too. And Biden right now is doing 32 points worse than 2020. Sorry, people aren't buying it. The Inflation Reduction Act didn't quite make the generational historic change for the working class, nor did the infrastructure deal. We've gone over and over. He's got a pen. Biden could do several executive actions that might persuade these voters, even excite these voters, if the Democratic Party is interested in that. I'm not convinced they are. But very interesting that Politico is reporting, according to them, there are some very close to Cornel West lobbying him to drop out. We'll keep digging to see who are those people.